The air inside the Grand Synod of the Ethel Guardian High Command did not smell of fear. It smelled of ozone, recycled nitrogen, and the acrid, metallic scent of overheating neuroprocessors. It was a sensory profile that had defined the last 10 cycles of the war, a war that was no longer a conflict but a slow, grinding execution. The vast, circular chamber, suspended within the crystalline superstructure of the orbital citadel Eye of Valorn, was usually a place of hushed reverence and absolute order. Today, it was a cauldron of suppressed panic. Holographic displays, towering 3 stories high in the center of the room, depicted the grim reality of the galactic frontier. The crimson stain of the enemy, the Krelixian swarm, was not merely advancing, it was consuming. Entire star systems blinked out of existence on the map, not conquered, but erased, their stellar mass harvested for the swarm's endless organic armada. High Exarch Thalrin sat upon the obsidian dais of judgment, his four-eyed gaze fixed on the dwindling defensive lines of the 7th sector. His carapace, usually polished to a lustrous sheen reflecting his high status among the insectoid nobility, was dull and pitted, a testament to the stress that was literally molting him from the inside out. Around him, the representatives of the Galactic Concordance bickered with the ferocity of the doomed. There were the gelatinous, aquatic hydrax, bubbling in their suspended tanks, arguing for a retreat to the oceanic depths of the core worlds. There were the cybernetic lithoid golems, calculating probability matrices that all ended in 0. And there were the humans, or rather the empty seat where the human representative, Ambassador Vance, usually sat. "The primates have abandoned us," spat Subcommander Vrak, a warrior-caste Ethel Guardian whose mandibles clicked with undisguised contempt. He gestured violently with a serrated claw toward the empty chair. "When the void darkened, they fled. We wasted cycles debating their inclusion in the Concordance. We gave them technology, stellar charts, hyperlane access. And for what? So they could scurry back to their mudball in the Orion Arm the moment the Krelixian biotitans breached the perimeter." Thalrin let out a low, thrumming sigh from his spiracles. "They did not flee, Vrak. They withdrew. There is a difference, though the distinction provides little comfort now." "Cowardice by any other name," Vrak snarled, pacing the perimeter of the central hololith. "They claimed they needed to prepare. Prepare for what? They have barely mastered Tier 3 shielding. Their kinetic weaponry is laughable against the swarm's carapace regeneration. Even if they returned with every ship in their meager navy, it would be nothing more than biomass for the Krelix to consume. We are alone, Exarch. We must authorize the Omega Protocol." A silence, heavier than the gravity of a neutron star, descended upon the chamber. The Omega Protocol was not a strategy. It was suicide. It involved the detonation of the hyperspace gates, collapsing the local star cluster into a singularity that would halt the swarm, but also obliterate the concordant civilizations instantly. It was the choice of a species that preferred extinction to assimilation. "The Omega Protocol requires unanimous consent," Thalrin whispered, the weight of billions of souls crushing his voice. "The humans are not here to vote." "Then we vote without them," shouted the Hydrax representative, her voice synthesized through the translator as a frantic warble. "The swarm is 3 standard hours from the Valorn system. If we do not act, there will be no one left to vote." The doors to the chamber, massive slabs of plasteel and ancient stone, did not open. They shuddered. The vibration was not mechanical, it was deep, resonant, a frequency that rattled the very bones of the Ethel Guardians and sent ripples through the Hydrax tanks. The council fell silent, their attention snapping to the entrance. The vibration grew in intensity, a rhythmic thudding that felt like the heartbeat of a planet. Then the sensors on the perimeter wall began to scream. "Report," Thalrin commanded, his claws digging into the armrests of his throne. "Unknown energy signature detected," the sensor officer, a young lithoid named Unit 77, reported, his vocal synthesizer flat but his processing speed spiking. "It is massive. High Exarch, the readings are nonsensical. The sensors are registering a gravitational displacement equivalent to a stellar body, but it is moving at sublight intercept velocities." "A Krelixian biotitan?" Vrak asked, his combat instinct flaring as he reached for his sidearm. "No," Unit 77 replied, and for the first time in his existence, the machine hesitated. "The signature is metallic, highly ordered. It radiates fusion energy, but on a scale that defies standard engineering parameters. It is emerging from the nebular cloud in the outer quadrant." The central halali. TH shifted, zooming out from the tactical map to the edge of the Valorn system. The swirling, violet gases of the nebula parted not gently, but violently, as if pushed aside by the prow of a god. From the mist emerged a shape. It was not sleek. It was not elegant. It possessed none of the organic curves of the Ethel Guardian ships, nor the fluid aesthetics of the Hydrax vessels. It was a block, a brutally geometric slab of gray durasteel, scarred and industrial. It was covered in antennae, heat vents, and weapon emplacements that bristled like the quills of a terrified beast. But it was the size that stopped the breath in Thalrin's throat. The Concordance dreadnoughts, the pride of the fleet, were 3 kilometers long. This vessel, this construct, was easily 40 kilometers from bow to stern. It was not a ship. It was a moving city, a fortress torn from the surface of a world and strapped with engines the size of moons. On the side of the hull, painted in stark white letters that were visible even from the orbital range, was a designation in the blocky human script: UNS Indomitable. That, Vrak whispered, his mandibles slack. That is impossible. The structural integrity required for a vessel of that mass, the torque on the frame during acceleration, it should tear itself apart. They are hailing us, Unit 77 stated. Audio only, wideband frequency. Thalrin gestured weakly, put it through. The speakers crackled, a sound of static that sounded like rain on a tin roof before a voice cut through. It was not the panicked voice of a fleeing refugee, nor the arrogant boast of a savior. It was calm, terrifyingly, utterly calm. It sounded tired, like a man who had worked a double shift in a factory and just wanted to go home. "This is Admiral Hackett of the United Nations Space Command vessel Indomitable," the voice said. "Apologies for the late arrival. We had to calibrate the mass drivers. We are detecting a swarm hive fleet entering the system. Please advise all Concordance vessels to withdraw behind the planetary shield perimeter. We need a clear line of fire." Vrak stared at the speaker, then at the hololith. "A clear line of fire? Against a hive fleet? There are 10,000 bioships out there. Does this primitive think his floating brick can hold the line alone?" "Admiral," Thalrin spoke, finding his voice. "This is High Exarch Thalrin. We welcome your assistance, but you must understand the scale of the threat. The Krelixian Vanguard alone possesses firepower capable of cracking planetary crusts. We are preparing the Omega Protocol. You should." "Belay that order, Exarch," Hackett interrupted. The rudeness of it, the sheer audacity of a human interrupting a High Exarch, sent a shockwave through the room. "With respect, if you detonate those gates, you wipe out 3 sectors. We didn't spend the last 20 years building this ship just to watch you commit suicide. Pull your fleet back. Indomitable out." The connection severed. "Arrogance," the Hydrax ambassador bubbled furiously. "Suicidal arrogance. They will be swarmed and devoured in minutes. That ship is a target, nothing more. A massive feast for the Krelix." "Wait," Unit 77 said. "Look at the energy readings on that vessel. They are spiking. Thermal output is rising by 400%. They are venting heat." On the screen, the massive gray slab began to glow. Massive vents along the flanks of the ship opened, spewing jets of white-hot plasma into the void, dumping the waste heat of reactor systems that must have been burning with the intensity of a small star. The ship didn't turn. It didn't maneuver. It simply sat there, a wall of metal between the approaching swarm and the vulnerable world of Valorn. The Krelixian swarm did not hesitate. Driven by a singular hive mind, the thousands of organic frigates and the massive, squid-like bio-titans surged forward. They fired their bioplasma, globs of corrosive acid and concentrated energy that could melt through hull plating like wax. "They're going to be vaporized," Vrak muttered, though his eyes were glued to the screen. The first volley of Krelixian fire struck the Indomitable. Or rather, it struck where the hull should have been. Instead of impact, the space around the human ship shimmered. A hexagonal lattice of golden light flared into existence, not tight against the hull, but projected kilometers out. The bioplasma struck the barrier and dissipated, splashing harmlessly like water against a rock. "Hard light shielding," the lithoid representative gasped. "That is theoretical physics. The energy requirement to maintain a hard light barrier of that surface area, it would require a Dyson sphere." Or, Unit 77 corrected, his processors racing, "it would require a singularity reactor. They have harnessed a black hole inside that ship." The room went silent. The implications were horrifying. If the humans had contained a singularity, they weren't just engineers, they were masters of gravity itself. The swarm is closing to melee range, Vrak noted. Shields won't help them when the boarders arrive. The Krelliks breed boarders that can chew through durasteel. On the screen, the Indomitables seemed to acknowledge the threat. Along the dorsal ridge of the 40-kilometer spine, massive turrets began to rotate. They were not energy weapons. They were cannons. Enormous, archaic-looking cannons with barrels the size of skyscrapers. Kinetic weaponry, the Hydrax scoffed. Projectile throwers at this tech level. Admiral Hackett said mass drivers, Thalrin murmured. The cannons fired. There was no sound in the vacuum, but the visual was enough to convey the violence. Flashes of muzzle fire, hundreds of kilometers long, erupted from the ship. The recoil was so immense that the visible maneuvering thrusters of the Indomitable flared blue-white just to keep the ship stationary. The projectiles were not simple slugs. They were ferrotungsten rounds the size of corvettes, accelerated to a significant fraction of the speed of light. They did not just hit the Krellixian ships, they atomized them. The lead bio-titan, a creature the size of a city that had endured the bombardment of the entire Ethelgardian fleet for a week, was struck by a single round. The kinetic energy transfer was absolute. The creature didn't explode. It simply ceased to exist, turned into a rapidly expanding cloud of superheated mist. The round continued, punching through the Titan and annihilating 3 frigates behind it before finally losing cohesion. By the void, Vrak whispered. The Indomitable fired again, and again. The rate of fire was slow, methodical, rhythmic. Thud, thud, thud. Each shot was a death sentence. The swarm, which knew no fear, only hunger, began to break formation. They had never encountered something they couldn't overwhelm. They swarmed the shield, trying to find a weak point, but the hard light barrier was impenetrable. And point defense grids, thousands of smaller railguns bristling on the human hull, created a zone of death 10 kilometers deep around the ship. Nothing touched the hull. They are not fighting, Thalrin realized, a cold chill running down his spine. They are exterminating. But the Krelliks were infinite. For every ship destroyed, 10 more dropped out of warp. The hive mind was adapting. They stopped firing and began to ram. Millions of tons of biomass hurled themselves at the shield, trying to overload the generators through sheer kinetic mass. Shield integrity dropping to 90%, Unit 77 reported. The heat buildup in the human vessel is reaching critical levels. They cannot sustain this output. Get me Admiral Hackett again, Thalrin ordered. The channel opened. The background noise on the human bridge was louder now, alarms, shouting, the hum of machinery pushed to the breaking point. But Hackett sounded exactly the same. Bored, determined. Admiral, Thalrin said, the swarm is concentrating its fire. You are surrounded. You must maneuver. We don't maneuver, Exarch, Hackett replied. That's the point of the Indomitable. We are the anvil. You guys were supposed to be the hammer, but since you're busy wetting yourselves, we brought our own hammer. Your own hammers. Deployment authorization confirmed. A computer voice spoke in the background of the audio feed. Exarch, Hackett said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming deadly serious. Shield your eyes, and for the love of whatever gods you pray to, do not look directly at the port side of my ship. Why? Because we're dropping the sun. The connection cut. Sun, Vrak asked. What does he mean? On the visual display, the underside of the Indomitable opened. It wasn't a hangar bay. It was a drop chute, vast and dark. From the darkness, a cylinder dropped out. It was small compared to the ship, maybe only a kilometer long. It drifted away from the Indomitable, spinning slowly. The Indomitable's engines flared, and for the first time, the massive vessel moved. It didn't turn. It strafed, using emergency thrusters to push itself laterally away from the dropping cylinder, putting maximum distance between itself and the object. The Krellixian swarm ignored the cylinder, focused entirely on the mother ship. They converged on the Indomitable. Then the cylinder detonated. It was not a nuclear explosion. It was not antimatter. It was a localized, artificially induced fusion ignition. For a brief, terrifying second, a second sun was born in the Valorn system. A sphere of pure plasma expanded at the speed of thermal radiation. It engulfed the center of the Krellixian fleet. The sensors on the Eye of Valorn went blind. The whiteout on the screens lasted for 10 full seconds. The radiation alarms shrieked. Even through the station's heavy shielding, the temperature in the council chamber rose by 5 degrees instantly. When the filters finally adjusted and the glare faded, the view was empty. The sea. Enter of the swarm was gone. The biotitans, the frigates, the endless drone fighters, they had been vaporized. All that remained was a cooling cloud of ionized gas and the drifting, charred debris of the outer edges of the fleet. The Indomitable remained. Its shields were flickering, its hull scorched black in places, but it was intact. "Target destroyed," Unit 77 said, his voice trembling. "Estimating 98% casualty rate for the Kralixian Vanguard. The remaining bioships they are retreating. They are jumping out of system." The room was silent. No one cheered. The display of power they had just witnessed was too terrifying for celebration. It was the kind of power that changed the balance of the galaxy forever. The humans, the species they had dismissed as primitives, as latecomers, as scavengers, had just deployed a weapon that mimicked the birth of a star. "They are hailing us," Unit 77 said again. Thalrin cleared his throat. He felt small. He felt like a child who had been playing with sticks when a giant walked by carrying a thunderbolt. Put him on." Exarch Hackett's voice came through. He sounded winded now. "Grid clear. We're detecting the rest of the Hive fleet moving to the Perseus arm. We're going to pursue, but we need to dock for resupply. We burned through half our heat sinks on that drop." "Resupply?" Thalrin asked. What do you require?" "Water," Hackett said. "Hydrogen and coffee, a lot of coffee." "Admiral," Thalrin asked, his voice shaking. "That ship, you called it a warship, but no warship carries the power to ignite fusion events. What is that vessel, truly?" There was a pause on the other end, a long, heavy silence. "You're right," Hackett said softly. "It's not a warship. We don't build warships like this anymore. We learned our lesson a long time ago. Warships are for conquering. We don't want to conquer." "Then what is it?" "It's a lifeboat," Hackett said. "Humanity spent the last century building it. It's an ark. It carries the genetic database of Earth, the cultural history of our people, and the means to terraform a dead rock if we ever lose our home. The weapons, the shields, that's just to make sure the lifeboat gets to the shore." The transmission ended, leaving the council in a stunned stupor. Vrax slumped into his chair. "A lifeboat," he whispered. "They built a god-killer and they call it a lifeboat." The docking procedure took 3 standard days. The Indomitable was too large to dock at the station. The station had to essentially dock to it. Shuttle traffic between the Eye of Valorn and the human vessel became a constant stream. The psychological impact on the Ethelgardian populace was profound. For generations, they had been taught that the elder races were the guardians of the galaxy, the pinnacle of evolution. Now they looked up at the sky and saw a human construct that blotted out the stars, a reminder that the young race from the Orion arm had surpassed them not in elegance, but in sheer, brute force survivalism. Thalrin stood in the airlock waiting. He had insisted on meeting Hackett in person. He needed to see the creature that commanded such power. The protocol demanded a full honor guard, but Thalrin had dismissed them. This was not a meeting of conquerors. It was a meeting of survivors. The airlock cycled. The heavy hiss of pressurization filled the corridor. The door slid open. Admiral Hackett stepped out. He was underwhelming. Thalrin had expected a giant, a cybernetically enhanced warrior, or perhaps a being radiating psionic energy. Hackett was a man of average height, with graying hair cropped short, a face lined with deep wrinkles of exhaustion, and a simple blue uniform that looked like it had been slept in. He held a steaming cup of liquid in one hand and a data pad in the other. "Exarch," Hackett nodded, taking a sip from the cup. "Nice station, little fragile but nice view." "Admiral," Thalrin bowed, a gesture of deep respect he rarely offered to his own kind. "Your arrival was timely. We are in your debt." "Debts are for banks," Hackett waved a hand dismissively. "We're allies. That's what the treaty says, right? Even if you guys did forget to invite us to the meetings for the last 5 years." Thalrin winced. "An oversight, one that shall be corrected. We underestimated you. We believed humanity was unprepared for the realities of galactic war." Hackett chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. He walked past Thalrin, looking out the viewport at his own ship. "You aliens, you always think war is about art, about strategy and honor and beam colors. For us, war is just an engineering problem. The problem is the enemy exists. The solution is remove the enemy with maximum efficiency. We're good at engineering." That weapon, Thalrin pressed, walking beside him. The fusion drop. The collateral damage potential is catastrophic if you had missed. We don't miss, Hackett said simply. Computer-assisted targeting with AI oversight. Besides, we didn't use the big guns. Thalrin stopped walking, his 4 eyes widened. The big guns, you possess weaponry superior to the fusion ignition. Hackett stopped and looked at the Exarch. His eyes were dark, and for a moment Thalrin saw the abyss within them. It was the look of a species that had looked into the face of extinction and decided to bite back. Exarch the Indomitable is powered by a contained singularity, a black hole. We use it for energy, for shielding, for gravity drive. But if we have to, if there is no other choice, we can invert the containment field. Invert? We can weaponize the event horizon, Hackett said quietly. We can project a gravity well that doesn't just burn the enemy, it drags them into a pocket dimension where time doesn't exist. We can erase a solar system from history. We don't like to talk about it. We don't ever want to use it. Because once you tear a hole in reality, it's hard to stitch it back up. Thalrin felt a nausea that had nothing to do with his biology. Why? He whispered. Why build such a thing? Because of the silence, Hackett said. The mood shifted instantly. The casual exhaustion vanished from Hackett's demeanor, replaced by a cold, steel-trap intensity. The silence, Thalrin asked. You mean the Krelliks, the swarm? No, Hackett said. The swarm is running, you figured that out, right? They aren't conquering, they're fleeing. They're stripping systems for biomass to fuel their migration. They're scared. Thalrin's mind raced. The Krelliks, the scourge of the galaxy, the invincible tide, were running. Running from what? Hackett tapped his datapad and projected a hologram into the air between them. It was a star chart of the unknown regions, the dark space beyond the galactic rim. 10 years ago, Hackett explained, our deep-range telemetry picked up a signal, or rather the absence of one. Stars in the Andromeda galaxy are disappearing, not going supernova, just vanishing, going dark. Something is harvesting stars, Exarch, something big. Thalrin stared at the map. A darkness was creeping in from the edge of the universe. The Krelliks saw it first, Hackett continued. They panicked. They started moving into our galaxy to escape it. We built the Indomitable not to fight the Krelliks, but to fight that. He pointed to the darkness. The Krelliks are just the rats running off the sinking ship. The water is rising, Exarch, and we're the only ones building a dam. The revelation hit Thalrin like a physical blow. The war, the politics, the struggle for territory, it was all meaningless. They were squabbling over a cabin while the ship was burning. Does the Council know? No, Hackett said. We didn't want to cause a panic until we had a solution. But now the Krelliks are desperate. They're going to push harder. We need the Concordance to stop fighting the Krelliks and start corralling them. We need to build a wall, and we need your resources to do it. You want to ally with the Krelliks? Thalrin asked, incredulous. I want to survive, Hackett said. If the Krelliks can fight, I'll give them a gun. If they can't, I'll get them out of the way. But the Indomitable is heading for the rim. We're going to meet the darkness. We're going to find out what's eating the stars. Hackett turned to Thalrin, his expression softening slightly. We're not the savages you thought we were, Exarch. We're the janitors. We clean up the messes the universe leaves behind. But we can't do it alone. We need the Concordance. We need your fleets to secure our rear while we push into the dark. Are you with us? Thalrin looked at the human. He looked at the small, soft creature that commanded a ship capable of killing gods. He realized then that the hierarchy of the galaxy had not just shifted, it had been inverted. The humans were not the children. They were the parents who had stayed up late to guard the house while the children slept. The High Council, Thalrin began, correcting himself. I will ensure the Concordance follows you. If the Krelliks are fleeing and you are advancing, then the safest place in the galaxy is behind your ship. Hackett smiled, a genuine, tired smile. Good, then let's get to work. I have a briefing with your Admiralty in an hour, but first, seriously, where can I get more coffee? The briefing room was different this time. The atmosphere was no longer one of panic, but of intense, focused dread. The human delegation had arrived in force. They were not diplomats in robes. They were engineers in jumpsuits, tacticians in field gear, and scientists with eyes that had seen too much screen time. They set up their own equipment, bypassing the Ethel Guardian holographic systems with their own hard light projectors. Admiral Hackett stood at the head of the table. Flanking him was a Krellixian. The room was frozen. The guards had their weapons raised, the Krell. Lixian was a broodlord, a 3-meter tall towering mass of chitin and muscle, but it was unarmed. It wore a translation collar around its neck. "Stand down," Hackett ordered, not shouting, but with a tone that brokered no argument. "This is Broodlord Xylth. He surrendered his vanguard to the Indomitable an hour ago. He's here to talk." "Talk," Vrak hissed. "It is a monster. It has consumed billions." "And I have killed millions of his kind," Hackett said coldly. "We're even. Sit down, Vrak." The Krelixian clicked, the translation collar vibrating. "The softshell speaks truth. The great devourer comes from the deep void. We run, we eat to run. If softshell stops the great devourer, we do not eat softshells." Eloquent, the Hydrax ambassador muttered. "It's pragmatic," Hackett said. "Here's the situation." The hologram expanded, filling the room. It showed the galactic rim. A red line depicted the Krelixian migration path. A black mass depicted the anomaly. "We call them the Entropy Lords," Hackett said. "We don't know what they look like because they exist partially out of phase with our reality. They feed on thermodynamics. They extinguish stars to harvest the energy gradient. If they enter the Milky Way, the galaxy freezes. Heat death, accelerated to a matter of years." "The Indomitable," a human scientist spoke up, a woman with sharp features named Dr. Aris, "is equipped with a reality anchor. It's a device that reinforces the laws of physics in a localized area. It prevents the Entropy Lords from phasing out of our dimension. If we can lock them down, we can kill them. But we have to draw them out." "Bait," Thalrin realized. "You need bait." "A lot of energy," Hackett nodded. "We need to create a signal so bright, so hot that they can't resist it. We're going to turn the Valorn system into a lighthouse." "You want to ignite the nebula?" Unit 77 asked, processing the calculations. "We want to overload the gate network," Hackett corrected. "Simultaneously, a pulse of hyperspace energy that will ring like a dinner bell across the void. It will draw them here, to Valorn." "You bring the war to our doorstep," Vrak roared. "It's already at your doorstep," Hackett snapped. "The Krelix are just the mud on the doormat. The storm is coming whether you invite it or not. We're just choosing where the lightning strikes. And we're choosing here because the Indomitable is here." The room fell into a debate that lasted for hours. The philosophical implications of allying with the Krelix, the risk of the plan, the sheer insanity of human engineering. But in the end, the logic held. The Ethel Guardians were proud, but they were not stupid. They had seen the sun drop. They knew the humans were the only option. The plan was set. The Concordance fleets would form a defensive perimeter around the Valorn system. The Krelixian remnants, under the command of Broodlord Xylth, would act as a sacrificial vanguard, a role they accepted with disturbing eagerness. And the Indomitable would sit in the center, charging the reality anchor, waiting for the monsters to knock. The preparation took a week. The Indomitable sat in high orbit, its engines idling, a sleeping giant. The Concordance fleets formed up in a sphere formation, a dazzling array of silver, gold, and crystalline ships. And among them, the dark, organic shapes of the Krelixian bioships drifted, an uneasy truce held together by the threat of mutual annihilation. Thalrin stood on the bridge of the Indomitable. He had been invited to observe. The bridge was not the sleek touch interface sanctuary of the Ethel Guardians. It was a chaotic mess of wires, physical keyboards, coffee cups, and shouting officers. It felt alive. "Pulse initiation in T-10 minutes, a tech officer shouted. Hackett sat in his command chair, looking at a small photo taped to his console. It was a picture of a green field, a blue sky, and a dog. "Exarch," Hackett said without looking up. "If this goes south, the Indomitable has an automated protocol. It will eject the bridge module and warp it to safety. You're on the manifest." "I will not leave my people," Thalrin said. "I know," Hackett smiled, "but I had to offer. It's in the regulations." "Admiral," Thalrin asked, "do you believe we can win, truly?" Hackett turned the photo over. "Win? No, you don't win against entropy, you just stall it. But we can stall it for a long, long time, long enough for my grandkids to figure out the next step. That's all humanity does, we buy time." "Pulse initiation," the officer shouted. "Do it," Hackett said. The hyperspace gates surrounding the Valorn system flared. Usually they were stable wormholes. Now, fed by the auxiliary reactors of the Concordance fleet, they screamed. A pulse of exotic energy, invisible to the naked eye but blinding on the sensors, erupted outward, rippling through the subspace layers of the universe. It was a shout into the void. We are here, we. Ray Warm, come and eat. Silence. 1 minute, 2 minutes. Sensors are clear, Unit 77 reported from his station on the human bridge. He had been invited as a liaison. Nothing. Wait for it, Hackett muttered. Then the stars went out. Not all of them, just a patch of the sky directly above the system's ecliptic plane. A circle of blackness, absolute and terrifying, appeared. It wasn't a ship. It was a shadow that was moving. Contact, Dr. Eris yelled. Dimensional breach, it's God, it's big, it's the size of a moon. The shadow descended. As it entered the system, the temperature dropped. The sensors on the outer ships frosted over. The Kralixian bioships closest to the anomaly simply died, their biological functions ceasing as the heat was sucked out of them. They're here, Hackett said. Engage reality anchor. The Indomitable shuddered. A low hum, deep and painful, vibrated through the hull. From the massive spire on the ship's dorsal ridge, a beam of pure white light shot up into the shadow. It wasn't a laser. It was a metaphysical nail. It struck the shadow, and for the first time the shadow took form. The reality anchor forced the entropy lord to obey the laws of physics. The shadow writhed and solidified into a shape that defied description, a geometric nightmare of shifting fractals and cold, blue fire. It screamed, a sound that was heard not with ears, but with the mind. A psychic shriek of hunger and rage. Target locked, Tactical shouted. It's solid, we can hit it. All fleets, Hackett broadcasted, fire at will. The sky lit up. The Ethel Guardian beams, the Hydrax plasma, the lithoid railguns, and the Kralixian acid, everything poured into the fractal horror. Explosions blossomed across its surface, chipping away at the frozen geometry. The entity fought back. It didn't fire weapons, it manipulated reality. It reached out a tendril of darkness and touched a Concordance cruiser. The cruiser didn't explode, it rusted. In seconds, the pristine metal turned to dust, the crew aging into skeletons and then to dust, the ship disintegrating into a cloud of ancient particles. Time acceleration. It's rotting us, Vrak screamed over the comms. It's using time as a weapon. Stabilize the anchor, Hackett roared. Don't let it shift phase. The Indomitable was groaning. The strain of holding a transdimensional god in place was tearing the ship apart. Sparks rained down on the bridge. Admiral, Reactor 3 is critical. The containment on the Singularity is fluctuating. Hackett stood up. Divert all power from life support to the anchor. Vent the atmosphere in the lower decks. Keep that beam firing. Admiral, that's suicide. It's the job, Hackett yelled. The beam intensified. The entropy lord shrieked again, its form cracking. The combined firepower of the galaxy was hurting it. It tried to retreat, to slip back into the subdimensions, but the Indomitable held it fast. We need a kill shot, Hackett said. It's regenerating too fast. He looked at Thalrin. Exarch, remember the invert protocol. Thalrin's blood ran cold. The weaponized event horizon. We have to use it, but we can't fire it at range. The dispersion is too high, we have to get close. How close? Ramming speed. The bridge went silent. Admiral, Thalrin said, if you activate the singularity inversion at point-blank range, the Indomitable will be consumed. I know, Hackett said. He keyed the comms. All hands, this is the Admiral. Abandon ship. All non-essential personnel to the escape pods. Bridge crew, you're dismissed. Get to the pods. No one moved. The young navigation officer, a human girl no older than 20, locked her console. Navigation locked, sir. Course set for the center of the target. The tactical officer, a scarred veteran, crossed his arms. Weapons armed. I'm not leaving the gun, sir. Hackett looked around his bridge. He looked at the aliens, Thalrin, Unit 77. You two, get out now, that's an order. Thalrin stood tall. I am a high exarch of the Ethel Guardian hegemony. We do not flee from destiny. If this is where the tide turns, I will stand on the breakwater. Unit 77 simply plugged his interface cable directly into the console. My processing power will assist in the targeting algorithms. The probability of success increases by 14% if I remain. Hackett looked at them and a fierce pride swelled in his chest. All right, let's show this ghost how the living fight. The Indomitable surged forward. The massive engines flared blue-white, pushing the 40-kilometer brick of durasteel toward the writhing fractal nightmare. The Entropy Lord sensed the threat. It lashed out with tendrils of time and cold. The hull of the Indomitable began to age. Armor plates rusted and fell away. The paint peeled. The superstructure groaned as thousands of years of wear occurred in seconds. But the ship held. It was built for this. It was built by a species that defied its own mortality every day. Impact in 10 seconds, navigation shouted. Invert the field, Hackett ordered. Drop the containment. Deep within the ship, the magnetic bottle holding the artificial black hole collapsed. The singularity, suddenly free, began to eat. But instead of eating the ship immediately, the reality anchor focused the hunger outward, projecting the event horizon like a spear. The Indomitable slammed into the Entropy Lord. And the universe held its breath. There was no explosion. There was an implosion, a tear in the fabric of the cosmos. The Entropy Lord, a being of cold physics, was suddenly introduced to the ultimate law of the universe. Gravity wins. The entity was dragged, screaming, into the singularity. Its fractal form stretched, spaghettified, and vanished into the darkness. The Indomitable, caught in the gravitational backwash, began to crumble. The bridge buckled. "It's done," Hackett whispered, closing his eyes. Then the twist. Just as the Indomitable was about to be consumed, the space around it warped. Not the destructive warp of the Entropy Lord, but a controlled, precise fold. The Indomitable vanished. The singularity collapsed on itself, evaporating in a flash of hawking radiation that lit up the system for a millisecond. The sky was clear. The shadow was gone. The Krelixian swarm, confused and leaderless, drifted in the void. Thalrin blinked. He was alive. He was floating in the command center of the Eye of Valorn. What happened?" he gasped. "I was on the ship. I was—" "Teleportation," Unit 77 said, standing beside him, smoke rising from his chassis. "Massive scale, short range. The humans, they transported the bridge crew and the essential command modules milliseconds before the collapse." Thalrin rushed to the viewport. Debris floated in space. The shattered remains of the Indomitable's hull, the massive engine bells, the empty shell of the lifeboat. It was destroyed. The greatest ship ever built was scrap. But in the center of the debris field, drifting silently, was the bridge module, a small, scarred metal box intact. And beyond it, the stars were shining. The darkness in the Andromeda sector, it wasn't gone, but it had stopped moving. The signal was quiet. The comms crackled. "Exarch," Hackett's voice, weak coughing, "you alive?" "I am," Thalrin choked out. "Admiral, the ship, it is gone." "Yeah," Hackett said. "She was a good ship, but she was a lifeboat, remember? She got us to the shore. We can build another one. We have the blueprints." Thalrin looked out at the galaxy. The fleets of the Concordance were hailing them. The Krelix were submitting. The war was over. The real war, the long war against the dark, had just begun, but for the first time they had a weapon. They had humanity. "Admiral," Thalrin said, tears of relief leaking from his eyes, "when you build the next one, make it bigger." Hackett laughed, a sound of pure defiance. "Oh, don't worry, Exarch. We're thinking of upgrading to a planetary drive. Why bring a ship when you can bring a world?" As the rescue shuttles launched, Thalrin looked at the human script on the drifting bridge module. Indomitable. He finally understood the translation. It didn't mean unbeatable. It meant unwilling to kneel. And the galaxy, shaken to its core, would never look at the soft, hairless apes from the Orion arm the same way again. They were not the children of the galaxy. They were the monster hunters. And the hunt was on.